Hello, and thank you for attending my session on mapping ethics to teach and learn ethics. Nonprofit and for-profit organizations, businesses, government agencies, think tanks, and laboratories must all do their part to ensure that employees are socially and technically responsible. Employers want to know that their employees can think and act ethically when called upon. A cook should wash her hands before touching the food that others will consume as an act of integrity towards and respect for persons. An analyst must follow data governance rules to protect their customers' identities as an ethic of care and trust for receiving their information through transactions. A welder must make design cuts to specifications if the products they fashion are to be safe and enjoyable to those who purchase them. And even the worker on lunch break is arguably an extension of the company's ethos and mission and is expected to abide by laws and other societal norms. Organizations employ ethics trainers and compliance specialists to lead their educational charge, since moral development doesn't stop in adulthood. In fact, when considering the 4 typical stages of moral reasoning, that is, moral sensitivity and recognition of ethical problems, moral judgment of plausible solutions, moral commitment and motivation to reasonable and defensible actions, and moral character towards duties, codes, and principles, some survey estimates show that many adult employees are usually stuck at the moral judgment stage. To counter this, ethics professionals have relied on case studies, casuistry, and even role-playing and complex simulations to achieve their ends. But as the virtual training world expands and physical classrooms dwindle, the spaces where employees practice and hone their moral reasoning skills become more personal and private. This repeated, spaced, and deliberate practice deficit that's purposeful and engaged and interacted with others may then lead to a lack of understanding and ability to deal with complex issues, as well as the more basic tenets of knowing what terms mean and how to use them in moral discourse. Understanding the latter is a crucial component of one of the first stages of moral reasoning. To improve long-term retention, generative learning strategies can be employed by learners. Rather than merely rely on the instructional design strategies that trainers often employ, generative learning strategies help learners to foster long-term retention and quicker retrieval by using cognitive principles such as chunking and listing so that learners can siphon the relevant signals from their sensory environment, thereby reducing the burden on their working memory capacity in order to better store information and knowledge in long-term memory and use it for solving problems. Worked examples are one such strategy, where experts model the right way to process and frame problems and apply the right tools to solving them, and then gradually removing the solution steps so that learners learn to solve them on their own. But there are many other generative learning strategies, including concept and knowledge mapping, drawing, self-explanation, self-testing, summarizing, imagining, and even teaching others. Let's focus on mapping. Maps are a great example of how generative learning strategies enable learners to navigate their sensory environments, reduce noise, and use space to their advantage. This digigeographical map in the picture above can simply and certainly be populated with other neighboring roads, towns, or even valid destination pathways. But maps work best when they show the user how to go from one point to another using the simplest or quickest route. The same is true when using maps in the context of generative learning activities. Such maps are called generative learning maps. The most familiar and well-used is a concept map, but there are many others, such as mind maps and decision charts. There are visual depictions of the relationships between various concepts or important ideas. They can proceed from a guiding or focused question. They may be linear in organization to help structure knowledge and information, but they can also be extraordinarily multidimensional in structure. They're best when making sense of disparate ideas, brainstorming, for example, or even integrating new information with prior knowledge. They can engage creative or higher order thinking. They are well-grounded in empirical and educational psychological theories and knowledge. And they have been applied to numerous domains from biology, chemistry, and other social sciences, and businesses and marketing. Here's a simple example that I drew. Although you can use a valid and well-respected app such as Lucidchart or a Word document or an Excel, I simply chose to draft this out myself. The power of drawing combined with mapping can help users to free up their cognition for maneuvering technology or different types of web-based applications, thus allowing the imagination to move a bit faster with respect to how fast their hands move. As an example, I chose to focus on the question, what is ethics? Ethics is not just tradition, religion, law, feelings, or norms. We've all been familiar with cases where certain norms in a society might be counter to doing right by others, to promoting justice and fairness. But these may certainly be grounded in aesthetics, agency, merit, rights, need, duties, and authority. However, ethics is limited by human will, casuistry, the power one holds in a network, in an organization, in society. It can also be limited by luck and fortune, and certainly by decision-making capacity and quality. We've also been familiar with how authority can influence decision-making capacity. From decision-making quality in ethics, we can think of how they are judged and assessed. We've seen cases on the news where the outcomes have been described as lawful or less than impartial, authentic or unfair, consistent or disproportional, for examples. However, the decision-making quality of an ethics outcome can be framed using acts, reasons, pleasures, desires, and a whole host of other qualities. Note that I put a question mark at the bottom middle branch to signify to myself that I am not quite sure whether this edge that I've connected between decision-making quality and frames or frameworks is a correct one to place, thus rendering myself a reminder that my map, if not incomplete, can also be misguiding. This is one of the powerful benefits of doing mapping by hand and being able to tag or note once for oneself certain types of complexities or perhaps misunderstandings or just guiding questions for future development of maps as more and more knowledge gets added to the user. Thank you for listening to me today, and I hope that you have a wonderful time attending the remainder of the conference.